Hey, everybody. Carlos Osvaldo here from Mozambique. Welcome to Freestyle Talks. So, this is our first edition in English. So, bear with me if language is not very good. Our first language is Portuguese in Mozambique, but we are doing an experience and pushing ourselves to try new things and talking to interesting people. So we will have a very interesting guest this afternoon or evening. Uh, it's he's called Hotep Jesus. He's American. He's a lot of things. So he's an author. He's a comedian. He's a social engineer. So I heard a lot of interesting things about him. I saw a lot of interesting interviews with him as well. And I made him an invitation to join us and talk about blackness and what's happening in the world and on US. So you have a chat available below, so you can text your questions or your comments in Portuguese or in English, and we will be able to display. And myself and Hotep will talk and answer to your questions. So welcome everybody. I'm gonna call Hotep on board, and let's do this.
Hey,
How's it, my friend?
life is well. Life is well. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for being here,
No
and
problem.
welcome to Freestyle Talks. Um, so Hotep, uh, who are you, man? I heard a lot of different titles. Author, marketeer, investor, social engineer, a comedian. And tell me a little bit about you where, and your background, basically.
Yeah. Well, I'm a dynamic person. I have, as Scott Adams has said about me, I have a very interesting skill stack. Um, I grew up around tech. Commodore 64 back in the 80s, when the internet first hit and AOL was around. We were hacking AOL to get online for free using fake credit card generators software. Then I moved to Black Planet, MySpace, but I was always an entrepreneur at heart. I was always a rebel too. I got in a lot of trouble in school. Not bad trouble, just, disobedience, challenging authority and power. But I think some of that stuff is what made me the person I am today, because, my dad just taught me to challenge people. He taught me to challenge beliefs. And so over the years, I've had a record label. I've been a touring artist. I've had a blog that, was doing millions of hits a month. I worked for 50 Cent. I was regional marketing director. Then I moved into, that was consumer packaged goods. Then I moved into the mobile app space. And I did a bunch of mobile app work. And then now I'm involved in cryptocurrency, AI, and still mobile apps. At a young age, I said I was either going to be a SWAT specialist or I was going to be some sort of scientist. I wanted to be the Black Bill Gates, so to speak. I wanted my own software company. I recognized early on it's a lucrative career. I recognized early on that I was great with software. My dad would hand me a piece of software and he'd hand me the manual, and I'd take the manual and I'd throw it out. And I'm like, nah, I'm just going to figure it out. And I would tinker and play and just learn pieces of software without a manual. Probably in hindsight, that probably wasn't a good idea, but I think it helped challenge my brain and help me, develop my problem solving skills. So yeah, I'm a father, uh, husband, and author, startup tech co-founder. My dad's a funny guy. He's got jokes for days. So my comedian side comes from him. You ever hang around him, he gonna be telling jokes all day long. So we're just a real funny family.
Mhm. Cool, man. And who's Brian Sharp and who's Hotep Jesus? Because I
Um,
found you. with both names on internet. So who's who?
Yeah. So, Hotep Jesus was a moniker that was given to me by some naysayers, and I liked the buzz it had, so I took it on. But then one day, I said, I wonder who has my name, my actual legal name, and I typed it in, and I saw somebody else had my name, and I'm like, nah, I need to take this over. So I wanted to have some Google domination for my legal name. So if you checked my legal name and my moniker, both of us would come up. I wanted also to publish my books under my legal name for legal purposes to make sure there was no discrepancies on who owned this work and who wrote it. Also, I wanted to be known for in the professional world by my legal name, but they're not really two different individuals. I'm very dynamic. Some people would say I have split personality. I don't look at it as that. I just think that I can adapt to a lot of different situations. I can adapt to the boardroom, and I can adapt to the streets and every place in between. Just a well-rounded individual who studies a lot.
Hmm. So I'm actually in Mozambique, in Maputo. So I was telling you this. We are in the bottom of Africa, right next to South Africa. We are the only country in the region who doesn't speak English, so our language is Portuguese. We are a former colony of Portugal. Um, so pardon me about my language if it's not on spot, but I'm doing my best here. Okay,
You're
so
doing
bear
wonderful.
with me. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
So I'm a curious guy. I'm a writer. I'm an entrepreneur as well, and I do a lot of crazy things. So this podcast I started a month ago is an example of that, and is a way I can talk to interesting people and to learn more and to feed my brain. And also to challenge myself because I was always a background person. I'm a writer and I am a producer in events, so I'm always in the background, and this way I'm pushing myself to always also be in the front line, and that way I can grow and get better in doing both things. Uh, and also I get to know interesting people and learn a lot and pick people I admire. So, and this is a very independent thing. I'm doing it myself. It's my channel. It's my platform. So I pick people, and it's people I care about and I want to listen to. So thank you again for being here.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, I found you on internet on this Joe Rogan interview. You
Hmm.
know, especially that part about Africans were in America before uh, uh, Columbus, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
Uh, so it really caught my attention, and I was very interested and curious to hear that. It's not the first time I heard that, but there was something about your way, the way you said it. The conviction and the passion I felt in your words about that topic. It made me feel that we, as an African country, we as Africans, we really need to hear about that and to think about that, because it's our history, it's our legacy, and that impacts a lot on who we are now and what we are living and going through these days. Uh, so I want to start maybe by asking you, how are things there in US right now with COVID, with the racism debate going on and those tensions? So tell me a little bit about the US right now, please.
Yeah, so COVID's really annoying. Where I live in New Jersey, things are closed. They actually just started to open up back up this week, but any place indoors, you have to wear a mask. Um, but yeah, it's just really annoying. It's an inconvenience. It's different, like me and my girl, have our favorite restaurant, and usually we do breakfast there once a week, and we haven't been able to visit, but she texts me today and say, hey, it's open now, right? So life is getting back to normal here. I don't agree with the way the government handled the lockdown, but what can you do, right? As far as racism is concerned, I think I've dealt with more racism in the 80s and 90s than I have now. I think racism now is probably more of a undercover type thing. It happens. It happens in policy, right? And it's very sneaky. It's very um, it's very what's the name of the socialist group? I'm trying to recall the name of the socialist group that Orwell was a part of. But Orwell was a part of a socialist organization, and they their logo was wolf in sheep's clothing. So you find that a lot of the policies pushed by Democrats pose as something that's supposed to be good, but they're actually detrimental to the black community. So it's not really the people that, call you the N-word and say they hate you that are the problem. It's really the people that pose as friends that are the problem. When we look at LBJ's New Deal, before the New Deal, there was a higher rate of black couples staying together. And then afterwards, you see that start to decrease. It seems everywhere that the white liberal sticks their nose and tries to help, they make things worse. And they don't help in a way where we can achieve and grow. For example, I believe that the best way for any society or any nation or any group of people is to rise is to first have an economic base, right? So no matter what civilization we look at, we go back to Greece or Rome, if you're wholly dependent upon another nation for your grain and water and so on and so forth, at any given moment, they can shut that off and they can control you. And now you have to go to war to get your life back in order. And that's what we have in the black community, where we don't have a strong internal economy. A lot of other cultures in America have a strong internal economy. They can almost survive without the interference of government or any other group of people. And black people just lack that. So the other thing you have to understand is that a lot of the racism that we see on the internet does not reflect what we see on the streets. Locally, you might have incidents of racism pop up here and there, but for the most part, white people are cordial and black people are cordial, and we, for the most part, we get along. It's not like this thing that you see in the media and on social media where there's this, raging race war. It's just not that at all.
Yeah, because the impression we have here is that America is burning, and everybody's on riots and tension on the streets. So that's why I really wanted to hear someone there on the source to give us the reality and to give us a perspective on what's really happening.
Yeah,
And
the socialist group is called the
yeah,
Fabian Socialists. For people
okay.
that want to look that up, that's the Fabian Socialists. Yeah, you were
Hmm.
saying, yeah, you wanted to get a peek into what's really happening in America.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we hear a lot about the riots and the tensions happening in US, and there is an idea that everybody's on the streets and cities are burning, and that's why I always doubt that image we see on TV, and I wanted to hear a person who lives there, who's living that, and is going through that, especially a black guy, to give us the reality and on what's really happening. So we have a comment and a question here from Bruna. So she's asking about these protests during the COVID times. So one one time there is a message saying don't go out and don't gather, and these protests are allowed. What? How do you see this?
Yeah, it's a contradiction, right?
Yeah, man.
It doesn't make sense at all. A month ago they said, no large groups together, And then now it's like, well, no large groups unless you're protesting, right?
Yeah.
But I think that goes to show you that, so in America, they've created this divide where there's a left and there's a right. And the left would probably vote for Joe Biden and the right would vote for Donald Trump. And it's the left that has more cultural control in America. The right really doesn't have much cultural control in America. It's mostly the left. The left owns uh, the banks. The left owns the educational institutions. The left wholly owns the media. So we live in a leftist dominated culture. So if America's going to crap, you know who to blame, right?
Yeah.
If you see that a contradiction in COVID, where 1 minute, for example, when they first told us that we had to, stay indoors and social distance and all that, after a while, the right got restless and carried out protests, and we're protesting, locally in many different spots. And the left media villainized them and said, "This is bad. You guys are bad. You're not social distancing." But when it was
Mhm.
time for the left to protest, all of a sudden, it didn't matter, right? It's like, oh
Yeah,
well,
prepare.
yeah, yeah. So we have to understand that this fake dynamic they created, this divide and conquer dynamic they created of left and right, is wholly controlled by the left, and the right is like hanging on for their dear life, fighting for a little bit of power to try and come back. And that's why Donald Trump was so important to the right, because they saw a win when Donald Trump became elected. They were like, okay, at least we have some representation and it's in the highest office of power. So they all rallied behind Donald Trump, because they're just tired of what the left has done. And if you look at the history of America, the left has just, for example, the history of the left includes the KKK, right? The history of the left includes um, racism. The history of the left includes eugenics, by way of Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood, where they're destroying Black lives in the womb before they're even birthed, and this is all Democrats, right? And you have to understand that when we talk about poor Black cities in America, the majority of them are controlled by the left and the Democrats. In fact, Jeff Charles had an interview with a guy, and a guy he's a right leaning Republican. He's a very ignorant person, and he asked Jeff. He says, "How come the Black community doesn't vote for Republicans?" And Jeff was like, "A lot of the times, there is no Republican option. There's no Republican there to vote for." And we have to understand that in America, the first senators in U.S. Congress were Black Republicans. So the Republican Party was initially for and with Black people. So all this history has been hidden, misconstrued, and the left, while they pose as a friend and point at the right as being evil and bad and racist, they themselves are to blame for a lot of the problems in the Black community.
It's funny. The message I got here in Mozambique, uh, and online, basically, is that left is pro culture, pro rights, pro freedom, and right is pro economics. So guys who are rich people, the big banking system guys, the corporations. So that's the impression we have here. So
No,
it's actually
no,
quite the opposite. Yeah.
no. I mean, some of that was true, but
Mm,
the left owns the banking system. Clear.
mm,
Clear as day. The banking system is Wall Street, and Wall Street is in New York. And if you know anything about U.S. politics, New York has been a blue Democratic state for a very long time now. Right. So that aspect is not true. The right does believe in economics. The left is more socialist in their leanings. Um, but the left is very socialist, and socialism, I would say, is inherently racist when you allow white people to use it to govern Black people. Now, if Black people want to practice socialism within themselves, in small areas, there's nothing wrong with that. That could be a good thing. But when the government wants to become socialist, you're basically having centralization of power, and that becomes a bad thing. We don't want people who've been doing evil to have all the power, and that's what socialism will bring about. So we have to understand there's macro socialism and micro socialism. Macro socialism, I would believe for a large population is bad. Micro socialism for a small population of people that agree on a lot of things is good. So we have to, when we talk about socialism, we have to understand those things. What's the
Mhm.
other thing you said about the left? What they believe?
No, culture,
Oh yeah,
culture,
yeah.
freedom. Yeah.
Well, that part is true. The left owns culture. When we think about Hollywood and we think about the record labels, that is wholly owned by the left. And the left does, in many ways, dictate the culture. It's not that they're receptive to culture, they dictate the culture, they control the culture through Hollywood, media, and music. And the right has done a poor job of acknowledging the importance of culture. And that's where the right goes wrong. The right likes to ignore culture, and the left likes to control culture, right? But there's people on both sides of the aisle, ordinary common citizens who enjoy culture. I don't think you can avoid enjoying culture, music, the arts, so on and so forth. Everybody here loves to watch a movie. Everybody here loves to watch Netflix or listen to music. So you can't say it's just wholly left, but the left does control our culture. It controls Black culture. It tells us, for example, if you're a what we call a conscious rapper, somebody who's going to deliver a message of strength and unity and Black power, the record labels won't push that unless they can control how that message is pushed. And the way they push that message is, it looks like they're an ally, but what they do is every single talking point is in juxtaposition to white people. It's as if Black culture can't exist without white people. So the left's idea of Black empowerment is to say, look at all the bad races. Whereas the Hotep ideology is like, forget the races. Let's look at our internal economics. Let's focus on building business and gaining power. And after we gain a little bit of power economically, then we can buy some attorneys and we can start controlling the courts. And after we control the courts, then we can start building our own military and having our military base. And this is how you get power. It's been like this since ancient Rome, since ancient Egypt. These rules don't change. But what the left likes to do is keep Black people in a state of victimhood and say, oh my God, you poor people, you can't do anything. We have to lower the bar so you guys can get into our institutions, and orange man bad, Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad, to keep us deflecting from actually building our own economic structure. And even when they offer opportunities for economic structure, it's never really anything good. They'll invest in Black business, but what kind of Black business is this? It's not one that's actually going to bring us power. They're like invest in like a Black soda company, right? Or nothing that's really going to build a strong economic base. They're not investing in education unless it's whitewashed. And I suggest everybody go listen to my Thaddeus Russell interview to really get an understanding of how the Democratic Party operates and has been controlling the Black community. I'll give you another story. Down in South Carolina, this was, I want to say this is sometime after Reconstruction and before civil rights. And the Black people down there said they wanted more money for Black schools. Right? For Black schools, right? And the NAACP is supposed to be for Black people, but was created by white people or Caucasians or the European. The NAACP sends one of their Negro Black delegates down to speak with these Blacks. And they say, what's wrong? And the Black people say, hey, we need more money from the state for our Black schools. And NAACP says, I understand your gripe, but what we're going to fight for is integration into white schools. And they're like, no, we want Black schools, money for Black schools. And the NAACP says, no, we don't agree with that. We want to integrate you into white schools, because the NAACP and the Democrats want to whitewash. They don't want you to have your own culture. They don't want you to have your own cities. And if you look at the Black community, it wasn't racism that destroyed our economic power. It was integration, because once integration hit, then we left and fled our Black cities because we could travel anywhere. And that was really what led to the destruction of the black community outside of Vietnam and all the other wars.
Mm. Uh, so tell me something about this George Floyd situation, right? So it's not the first time it happens. So it's been happening for a while now, or maybe always. See, it always happened. Maybe. Why is it different now?
Well, you have to understand that America's population is somewhere around 400 million. And when you have a population of 400 million and you have a police state, a militarized police state, you're going to have conflicts, right? And police aren't robots, they're humans. So they're going to make mistakes. They're going to have emotions. And sometimes they're going to do the wrong thing. But the funny thing about the George Floyd situation, although it was horrific what happened to him, and I send my heart out to his family, these type of stories don't go into the media until election year. Right now in the United States, we're in election year. The last time we saw a lot of these things being reported was the last election year, 2016. And there's this great book by Neil Postman called How to Watch TV News. And I suggest everybody get a copy. This is required reading. And in this book, what he says is the media can create a crime spree at any time they want. All you have to do is just find all the stories of crime sprees and continue reporting on just those. And they do the same thing with Donald Trump. You know, it's as if to say, let's say we had a camera follow you around, right? And then the only thing that we put on YouTube was every time you made a mistake, but we don't show any of the good stuff you do. People would think, oh, this guy's an idiot, right? So that's what the media does. They select only the bad to get whites and blacks to fight each other and argue online, social media, so on and so forth in the election year because they want to drive people to the polls. We have to understand that um, more than half of Americans don't vote in the federal election. So half of Americans don't even believe in the American system. So in order to get people riled up to go to the polls, they find these stories, they highlight them, and they report on them around the clock to put black people in this hysterical state. And they're always running around like chickens with their head cut off. They're always emotional, not logical. These things do happen. It just doesn't happen as often as the media likes to portray it does.
Mhm.
Now, the right understands this dynamic, but they fail to show sympathy or empathy towards the people that are dead. So the right loses this war because the left fakes the sympathy. And therefore, the left controls the conversation and therefore controls the black vote and the black population and the black ideology. So it's like the left is the puppet master and black people are the puppets. But there's a system above the left and the right, which are, I would say, communists, Bolsheviks, and Mensheviks, if anybody understands the Russian Revolution. But the puppeteer is playing all of us. White people are puppets and black people are puppets, and they get us to fight each other. And that's really what's happening in America.
Actually, last week I had a conversation with a Brazilian guy in the platform here, and we were talking about the situation from a Mozambican perspective and a Brazilian perspective. And one thing we talked was about the Black Lives Matter movement, right? So I was telling him I heard an interview a couple of weeks ago from a conspiracy theorist guy, and he was saying that this movement is funded by corporations and by white people owned corporations. There is an agenda to put black people in hysteria and fighting amongst each other, and blacks versus white, to keep us fighting while they are mastering a big plan, right? And I actually checked on their website, on the Black Lives Matter website, and I found that corporations there funding, and also a huge merchandising, so T-shirts and caps, So it is a big business right now, right?
Oh, yeah. Black Lives Matter is big business. I mean, in order to understand what's happening with Black Lives Matter, you'd have to first understand how hard it is to organize something, organize a group of people, right, and mobilize them and then get them to go out into the streets. It's not an easy thing at all. So when you see Black Lives Matter popping up in dozens of cities across the United States, many of them are paid protesters. Many of them are a part of organizations, and these organizations are mobilized. And yes, they are European, white controlled and funded. But the interesting thing about the Black Lives Matter website is their omission of Black men, their need to affirm the lives of trans and LGBT people, which I have no problem with, right? But when we look at, I believe Angela Davis said this, uh, when we had the Black Panther movement and we had a Black movement in America that was rising and growing strong, this feminist movement tried to invade and get Black women to join the feminist movement. And she was like, why would we split our forces? Our forces are already behind enemy lines and are already in an uphill battle. Why would we divide our forces? And again, this comes back to the art of war, divide and conquer. What the white liberal or the white socialist does is they get you to divide, right? So it went from, Black lives are being slain to, what about intersectionality, right? And, what about gay lives and trans lives and women lives? So now you're fighting 4 different battles when really it began with just Black people. So then what you have, especially on social media, you see a lot of arguing and fighting. The women are saying that the men are bad, and the gay people are saying Black men are bad. You even have one article from a very popular and white funded organization that said Black men are the white people of Black people. So and you'll even recently you'll see one of the Black Lives Matter founders called herself a Marxist. She said, I'm a Marxist. So this is just more evidence to show you that the Marxists and socialists are the ones that are controlling the ideology and funding these people and brainwashing them and giving them the talking points and so on and so forth. Again, that was part of the integration plan. They didn't really want Black people to be a part of white schools because of equality. They wanted them a part of white schools so Black people would think like white people, so they can control the mind and remove the real revolutionary aspect out of them and replace it with this Marxist revolutionary.
So we have a question about that topic. So Bruna is asking if you don't agree with integration, as you were talking about schools.
Yeah. So in order to understand integration, you would have to understand the history of the United States. There has always been Black and white people living and working and loving together in the United States. I mean, we talking way back. We talking 1700s, 1800s. You had bars where white and Black people danced, hugged, fornicated together, right? So, and then on through Reconstruction, you had white people coming to Black shows, and you had Black people going to white shows, and you always had. There was no hate like people like to push. The Marxist version of history likes to push white people are always bad to Black people. And it's just not true. Were there certain places where this happened? Yes, there were certain spots, right? Here and there, you had whites hanging Blacks. And I think at its peak was 2 a week, right? But the part of history that they omit is that Black people were whooping white people's butt too. It wasn't like we were just taking the butt whooping. We fought back. So we had little battles here and there, little mini wars here and there. So it wasn't like we were opposed to integration. I think there's a difference between voluntary integration and forced integration, right? So voluntary integration means I want to be with white people and white people want to be with me. So let's hang out together, right? And I have no problem with that. Hotep Nation, this logo you see behind me, this logo you see on my hat, is supported by white people. And a lot of them are white people on the right or in the middle. A lot of them are in the middle. So I'm not opposed to voluntary integration. What I'm saying is that forced integration was a psyop for the black mind. It was to control the black mind, to take black kids who had uh, a black ideology, a black first ideology, then take them, bring them into schools, remove their history. You won't learn African history. You won't learn real black history. You won't learn real American history. We're going to give you our version of history. We're not going to teach you the same as we teach the other white kids. If you look at schools in America, what they do with black kids is, it happened to me. I went to they had me in like these remedial classes. There's like 4 levels, right? You got AP, which is advanced placement, level 1, level 2, level 3, and then level 4. Level 4 is like the bottom. Like, this is where the troublesome kids are. At a young age, they put me into a couple of level 4 classes, and my parents didn't realize this until I came home one day in 9th grade and I said, yo, I went to class today and kids were just throwing papers at the teacher. So my parents investigated, come to find out I'm in level 4 classes. So when I go to high school, they test me. And when they test me, they find out, actually, they tested me in 8th grade. And in 8th grade, they found out that I was reading at like an 11th grade level, right? My math was at like a 10th grade level. So I was above my grade level, but they had me held back. And this is what integration does. It wants to control and put you off to the side. So you think you're integrated, but you're technically still segregated. And you'll see it in schools a lot where black and white kids go to the same school, but all the black kids are in one class and all the white kids are in another class. So it's fake integration. Now, the other thing we have to understand about forced integration is this is the thing that gets racists upset. You know, you can't say, let's say I built a black school, right? And the government came and said, hey, you know, put white kids in this school. You're like, wait, hold on. I built this for my people. You know, we don't want white people in this school, right? But they wouldn't do that. They wanted to force integration on white folks to cause this war, to cause this fighting. Black people didn't ask for integration. Black people, again, asked for funding for black schools. And I'm going to show you another example. In America, you have Indians, and I'm talking about the people from India, people from Pakistan, all these different cultures. You have Chinese and Japanese. If you go to New York City, you got Chinatown. If you're in New Jersey, you got what we call like Little New Delhi, right? And you'll have places where it's wholly owned and controlled by Indians, or places that's wholly controlled by Chinese. And nobody says anything, right? Nobody cares. Nobody says anything because these two groups have power. But if white people did that, it becomes a problem. If black people did that, it becomes a problem. Even in Spanish communities, you'll have little, like in Florida, you have Little Havana, and it's all the Cubans have one area, or Haitians have all one area. Even Jamaicans, you'll always find a Jamaican restaurant somewhere. It's just the black American who really has no control because we've been integrated to want to be into white institutions. We don't want to build anything black. We want to be up under white people. And that's the problem with integration. Now, if you want to be with white people, that's fine. But when the government comes in and says you have to allow black kids into your school, that's a problem. And if you go read Brown versus the Board of Education, you'll see the psyop within that document.
No, it's interesting. I had no idea about that process of integration. Actually, I never heard a lot about that history. But since we are talking about history now, it all started on slavery and before that, right? So back to that. So I see you're nodding. So tell me about our history, where we first black people came to America. How was it in the beginning, and when did things turn sour?
So you have to go look at the work of Christopher Columbus or Cristobal Colon, which is his real name. And you have to look at the work of Bartholomew de las Casas. Bartholomew de las Casas was a slave owner in South America. And then we got to look at the work of Cristobal Colon. And what Cristobal Colon says in his own writing is, everywhere we went, we saw black people. All right. Now, if you believe the fact that black people are the original man, all right, then you understand that the original man had a lead, they had a head start in exploring the earth. So one thing that's been stripped from us is the true history of the Native Americans. You know, they like to pretend like these people are a separate people, but there's this book by I have it upstairs, David M. Hotep, right? And right now, if you go look online, I think it's Africans and the Americans Before Columbus is the name of the book, I believe. But the book right now is $953. All right. And what they do is when we issue these works, they buy them all up and then they jack up the price because they don't want people to know the truth. They want to make the truth really expensive so it doesn't get disseminated to a large population of people. If we look at a woman by the name of Sarah Rector was someone who had black blood. And when you go look at her, it looks like a black woman. If we look at King Kamehameha, he is a king in the 19th century on the Hawaiian Islands. And when you go look at his paintings, you're looking at a black man, right? So we have to understand that when first man comes out of Africa, he explores. And when you say black people weren't in the Americas before Christopher Columbus, what you're basically saying is Africans knew nothing about boats. And everybody knows boats are a very old type of technology. And also, like I said on Joe Rogan, you don't need a sail. You don't even need paddles per se. Because the current takes you right to the Americas from Africa. If you leave off the west coast of Africa, it takes you to the Caribbean, it takes you to South America. Now, once you land in South America, you land in the Caribbean, we see it today. People in Haiti are getting on these makeshift rafts and are making it to the Americas. Cubans, we saw this in the 80s. Cubans were getting on these makeshift rafts, leaving Cuba and coming to the Americas. So it's not impossible to come from Africa, float to the Americas and the Caribbean, and then take a boat and get to America. And so when they tell you that blacks weren't in America, it's wholly a lie, right? And it's because they don't want you to know about things like the Dawes Roll. The Dawes Roll is DAWLESROLL. And a Dawes Roll is basically a thing called the $5 Indian. And what white men were able to do was pay $5 and get the status of a Native American, because Native Americans had certain privileges, that they were given through reparations. So white men wrote the code that said, hey, we're going to give reparations to natives, and then wrote themselves in as natives. And this is all history. It's all documented. For example, when I was a torrent artist, we had a show down in Florida. And, I run into this guy, he owns a casino, and he tells me he's Native American. And I look at him like, what? Looks like a white man, blonde hair, blue eyes, looks like a white man. But the people that worked for him were darker skinned, right? So what you have are white men stole Native ancestry, claimed it, and then hired the actual Native Americans. When you look at the story of Pocahontas, Pocahontas is supposed to be a Native American girl. But what is Pocahontas? Pocahontas is a mulatto. It's a Native American and a white man who defected the army. If you look at American history, you got to read this book called by Howard Zinn, United States History. I forget what it's called, but if you type in Howard Zinn, United States History, you'll see his book come up. Great book, about 300 something pages. But he talks about how when white men came to this country, now white men did come on boats to this country. They weren't native to this land. When they came over, they were treated unfairly by the upper class. So they defected and go live with the natives. And natives said, cool, come hang with us. So what happens is, now this is 18th century, right? It's 1700s we're talking about now, that white men and natives are working together and we're coming to attack the colonies. Now, when you have white men integrating with the natives, you get more mulattoes. So you'll always see these pictures of Native Americans with straight hair and fair skin, but they're really mulattoes. And they like to make it seem like they'll even tell you the story about the melting of the Bering Strait and the Mongols coming over and them being the true natives, right? And I'm not saying that Mongols didn't come through the Bering Strait, because they absolutely did. And that's why you see a large Asian population occupying California. But the East Coast, which is close to Africa, was wholly, and even if you believe in Pangea, that means that the Africa was connected to the Americas. So we had to have crossed the border and we had to have been here. But, removing Pangea aside, it is not impossible to leave Africa and come to America. We got Somalians doing it today. How they do it, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is they're doing it and going to Europe, right? With no motorboats, just, somehow making it. So if these people who with no resources can leave Somalia and make it to Europe, hopefully the Europeans don't kill them while they at in the water. You're saying it's impossible for us as an organized kingdom? Let's look at the kingdom of Songhai, right? Let's look at the Mali Empire, right? And the Mali Empire, when you talk about the Mali Empire, they say their mother was ancient Egypt. And people like to say blacks didn't start ancient Egypt, but the Mali Empire said mama was ancient Egypt. That's why King Mansa Musa went back to pay homage and tossed all those gold coins everywhere and destroyed the economy. And then he came back, right? So you have, before Europe has its first real strong kingdom, we had the Songhai Empire and the Mali Empire. And this is after, Egypt. We even have the Ottoman Empire where whites were enslaved. So how is it you got all these empires which predate Columbus by hundreds of years, but saying they didn't come over here, when it's written down that I think it was King Kahari. I think it was the King Kahari actually sent an expedition to the Americas and said, go out there and find out what's going on. So our history has been polluted. And that's why I say integration is bad. They integrate you to white schools so you would never teach yourself your own history, so they can give you a whole new version of history. And even Africans have a colonized version of history. And the things I'm saying are foreign. Now, I went to Africa and I've had, talked to people in Tanzania and they're like, I've never heard any of this. And I'm like, really? Hey, like, you never heard this stuff? And I thought they would have a better sense of history than us. But no, we've been colonized through integration. People think we were colonized through war. No, we were colonized through integration because they colonized our mind. And that's the strongest form of colonization.
Yeah. In my case, I studied in Portugal, as I told you in the beginning, and I learned the European version of history. So I learned about the hero who arrived in America, and and then even slavery is told in a romantic way, like we were missionaries who were there to save the poor, indigenous and ignorant black people, and to give them a civilization, a culture, an identity. So it's really powerful how we are brainwashed since birth, basically. And that's why I heard your interview, and it really popped my brain a lot. Like, it makes a lot of sense what you are saying, and we never stop to think about it.
Yeah, even slavery is not told properly. If you want to understand slavery, you got to get Thaddeus Russell book, Renegade History of the United States. But they like to talk about how slaves were beaten, right? Now, I believe the numbers on that was somewhere between 1.2 lashings a year and 0.7 lashings per year, right? So it's not like this brutal thing that they tried to make it seem like. In fact, it doesn't even make sense to beat your slave because, that's what causes rebellion, right? It causes anger. It causes resentment. it makes more sense to treat your slave like a child, or like one of your own. And that's really what happened in America. The slave master in their own book said, treat your slaves good, and they'll treat you good. They won't want to escape and leave the plantation, and then, white Americans were complaining. They said the slave lives better than us. The slave dresses better than us, because white Americans had to abide by American law. Slaves weren't considered Americans, so they didn't have to abide by American law. So they could drink alcohol as much as they want. They could fornicate as much as they want. They could dance as much as they want. And they were dressed because their masters dressed them. So they had less responsibility. Whereas a white man who had to, figure out a way to survive on his own had it really, really hard. It's the difference between being a salary employee and an entrepreneur, But when you say, slaves were beaten, you have to understand that corporal punishment in America, even in Jamaica, I'm not sure if they still practice it, but I know when my brothers and sisters went to school in Jamaica, you got a whooping in school, right? They might practice some of this stuff in Africa still. There were this corporal punishment, right?
Still did
yeah. So when they say, oh, they were whooping slaves, no, everybody got whooped. White people, black people, no matter who you were, if you broke a law, you got lashings. And there's this thing called a pillory, right? And the pillory is that thing they put their head through and their arms are right like that. Yeah, they did that to whites. When you broke a law, you had to, stay in the pillory for a certain amount of hours. And sometimes they beat you. Or when you look at France, they beheaded you, right? The way that Europeans ruled was just barbaric, period. It wasn't like they were barbaric just to black people. They were barbaric to everyone. But, the thing that's missing from slavery is at the same time that black slaves were freed in Americas, white slaves existed in the Ottoman Empire. When you look at the history of slavery, did you know that the first legal slave owner was a black man?
No, had no idea.
The first legal slave owner, you go look this up. This is all documented history. They won't teach you, but you can look it up. It exists. The first legal slave owner was a black man. And you had, in fact, go on Amazon and look up black slave owners. You can go purchase the books. The books exist. They won't tell you that they exist, but they exist. Type in black slave owners, and you'll have some of them call themselves Creole. And this was a lot of it was in what they call New Orleans, which was conquered by the French. But U.S. history is just wholly not taught at all. But, you had thousands of black slave owners. You had thousands of black slave owners who would purchase their family members. Like, oh, is that my aunt over there? All right, I'm going to come buy my aunt. And they would buy people's freedom, So, when people paint this history of the United States being unfair to black Americans, there's some truth to that, but that is not the whole truth. Black Americans have had a lot of power. You can go look up when we're talking about suffrage movement, right? Women's suffrage movement and women's freedom. Women were oppressed in this country. And what women started to do was they became prostitutes and they became madames. And the madames were living better than everybody. It's like today, girls go get an OnlyFans and they make, $200,000 a year selling porn online. This isn't something that's new. The madames had castles and palaces, and some of them, I can't recall the name, but again, in Renegade History of the United States by Thaddeus Russell, he's naming black women who had power by becoming a madame. Or what we would call a prostitute. And I don't agree with prostitution, but the funny part is the madame had more freedom than a free white woman and a free white man.
Yeah.
So, these are things that just aren't taught about U.S. history.
Yeah, I actually heard a quote from Spike Lee recently. He was telling America was founded on slavery and genocide because of the Native Americans. So that's a part of the official version we hear in a way. But do you believe slavery happened, right?
Yes.
But it wasn't in the way we were taught.
Yeah. So what they'll tell you is, we came from Africa on boats, right? We came
Yeah.
from Africa on boats because we came from the Mali Empire and the Songhai Empire, not because the white man brought us here. But they'll tell you that. Now, I was on Joe Rogan when I brought this fact up. His assistant went and looked it up, right? And he said, yo, this guy's right. Only 5% of the slaves in America were brought over here by white Europeans. That means 95% were already here.
In Caribbean and these areas, right?
All over.
Okay.
No matter, I mean, when you go to Australia, what you see? You see the Aboriginals. When you go Papua New Guinea, what do you see? Aboriginals. When you go to China, what do you see? Aboriginals, right? Black people. When you go to Indonesia, in fact, when we look at Nike, right, and the Nike sweatshop factories, and we go look at pictures, it's not Chinese people in there. It's Black Chinese women that are in these sweatshops. The Indonesian population is wholly Black. Brazil has the second largest population of Black people next to Africa. But when you look at Brazil, what do they always show? They show you that light-skinned fair woman. But they don't show you that, you got the Blacks that don't even make it to the World Cup team because they prefer, when you look at Argentina is like something like 97% white because they practice ethnic cleansing. You see what I'm saying? When you look at the Chinese, there's this Chinese guy, you can go look it up on YouTube. This Chinese scientist, he was I believe a genealogist. He specialized in DNA. And he wanted to prove that Chinese people were a completely separate race than everybody else. So he tested all types of Chinese people, rural, mountain, native, city people, everybody. He took samples from everybody. He wanted to prove there was no Black in them. You know what happened? Every single sample came back with African DNA. There's not a person on this planet you can find that does not have African DNA. The African is the first human being. We are a sun planet. We are dominated by the sun. Even the Bible is called Helios Biblios, book of the sun, which comes out of Africa. White people can't survive in the sun. They need all types of technology to survive in the sun. We don't need technology. We just need a tree every once in a while to sit underneath the shade. But we are sun people. We are the original people of this planet. And it's written all over the place. It's written all over Europe. It's they got a Black Madonna, and they kiss the feet of a Black Madonna. You see paintings in Europe of a Black Jesus, and then later on they change it to their own likeness. But we have to understand that Black people have been on this planet for so long. It's impossible for us not to be in the Americas.
And everywhere, right?
And everywhere else, Hawaii, Indonesia. They even got Black Russians. When you go look at, you got Black Italians. You go look at the Medici, right? The Medici family has got a Black. When you go look at, like they called Thomas Jefferson, who was one of the presidents of the United States. It's 13 Black presidents in the United States. No. Barack Obama wasn't the first mulatto. Barack Obama's a mulatto. His mother's white and his father's African, right? So Barack Obama is not the first quote unquote Black president. He's just another mulatto. In fact, Thomas Jefferson, they called him a Negro president, and his father was a mulatto. Okay. I have no idea. Yes. When you go look at the $2 bill, they took the $2 bill out of circulation because on the back of the $2 bill, you see a Black man in Congress. I believe his last name was Hanson. Go look that guy up. Abraham Lincoln, if you look at United States money, all of our coins are in a silver color. Yeah. But our penny is a copper. Right? Brown, for the brown president that was Abraham Lincoln, they called him an N-word president, a nigger president. His hair was curly. He too was another mulatto president. And when you look at him, take all the US coins, line them up, you'll see he's facing to the left and everybody else is facing the opposite direction. So they're turning their back on one of the original Black presidents. There's a large presence of Black power in the United States. For example, you ever heard of Benjamin Banneker?
No.
Benjamin Banneker designed Washington, D.C. He designed it. He did the survey for. So how are you oppressed and a slave? Slaves don't get educated to do surveys and design cities, but he designed the capital of the United States, Washington, D.C. These are all facts. A slave can't do that. A slave needs to be educated.
Yeah, indeed. It's true. It's fact. So, Matt, what can we learn from all this history and this hidden history we are unveiling and discussing now? Uh, uh, What can we use to this day and to the times we are living now, and these struggles and tensions and everything we hear and we see and we feel these days? Yeah.
You have to understand that the reason why they teach Africans and Black Americans, who I believe are Africans too, a message of white man did us wrong is to keep us in a state of victimhood, to make us feel powerless. Now, if they told us the true history of the Americas, and they told us the true history about all the empires that existed in Africa, you would subconsciously feel empowered. But instead, the Black American and many Africans feel disempowered. They feel as though they never had power. Especially when you're Black American, you're taught that your history starts at slavery. That's what you're taught. So if you have a child who believes his history starts at slavery, subconsciously he thinks, I'm a slave. So he never really strives for more. Knowledge is power. All of our ancestors have said that. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power because knowledge leads to technology, and technology leads to evolution. We need to take our knowledge and we need to learn true and exact history that doesn't include white people. If you're reading history and include white people, you're not reading Black history, you're reading white history. Black American history is white history because everything that we teach has to do with the white man. For example, Martin Luther King Jr., right? You heard of him, right? Okay.
He's painted as a hero.
He's painted as a hero, right? And he was not.
Tell me why.
He was an integrationist. In fact, these speeches he gave were written by a white socialist. He was owned and controlled by white socialists. You know about Marcus Garvey? You don't know about Marcus Garvey?
No, sorry.
Oh, man. All right.
Tell me.
Again, Marcus Garvey, this is going back to like 1913. Marcus Garvey is a Jamaican man, and he comes to the Americas, and his opponent is W.E.B. Du Bois. You ever heard of W.E.B. Du Bois? Okay. So again, we're looking at left versus right, using these terms loosely. Marcus Garvey said, look, I'm going to build these ships and we can go back to Africa. I'm going to build these businesses and we can have power right here. So while Black people in America were complaining about the KKK, Marcus Garvey had a meeting with the KKK and negotiated a settlement and said, hey, y'all got a problem with Black people. What's your problem? They told him, look, we don't want to be with y'all. He said, cool. What land y'all want? All right, cool. You stay there and we stay here. And it was negotiated and the KKK agreed. And Black people had their side of the land and the white people had their side of the land. This is somebody who was a brave man. He didn't look at himself as a victim. Mm-hmm. You got to understand Marcus Garvey to understand the erasure of Black history. How is it that we get a holiday for MLK, but we don't get a holiday for Marcus Garvey? How is it we have this Jamaican man who comes to America and succeeds and builds businesses, but nobody knows about him, right? But Black Americans know all about W.E.B. Du Bois. So Marcus Garvey comes over to the Americas and Black leftists get him locked up and extradited, kicked out the country. Black Americans did this because he wasn't teaching integration. He was teaching Black empowerment. Look, white man gonna do what white man do. Let's focus on building our business. I'm going to train you. We're going to teach you math. We're going to teach you science. We're going to give you a trade. You're going to learn engineering. You're going to learn how to, fix cars, so on and so forth, build engines. All these things is what he's teaching, right? They didn't want that. They wanted integration. So they had to get him out of here. But you won't hear about Marcus Garvey. And Marcus Garvey's history is rich. So you heard of the NAACP, right?
Mm.
Okay. Marcus Garvey writes in one of his speeches and writings. It's called Marcus Garvey Speeches and Writings. It's a book of most of his work. And in there he says he walks into the NAACP chapter, and when he walks in, he had a hard time believing it was for black people because everybody there was either white or near white. There's nobody with brown skin in that building. Again, this is an organization owned and controlled by Europeans. You can type this in. Who started the NAACP? It wasn't black people. You're aware of that, right? Yeah. So how is it you know all about the NAACP, but you don't know about the UNIA? You ever seen the black, red, and green flag? No. So you know about the United States flag, but you didn't know that Marcus Garvey gave black Americans our own flag, and it was black, green, and red, and it's called the UNIA, the United Negro. I forget what the I stands for, association. This is going back into my old studies. But the UNIA, go look it up. And he organized the UNIA, and he gave us our own flag. And there's a lot of black Americans who fly this flag today. You go look at a brother by the name of Wordsmith who performed down in WORDSMIFF, and he performed down in South Africa recently. He flies the UNIA flag. So how is it the UNIA is not known, but we know about the NAACP? Again, this is part of our hidden history. So, you ask me, what can we do? First and foremost, we have to teach our children right and exact history. I don't want to say second, because this stuff has the same level of importance. We have to become masters of science and math. Reading is important too, but you got to learn to read anyway, right? So there's no reason to try and say reading is super important. Reading is not as important as understanding math and science. Math and science and technology and engineering, we call it STEAM. Science, technology, engineering, art, and math. There's no reading in there, but you got to learn to read to understand these things anyway, which is why we don't purport reading. Africa has to understand that Africa is going to become the new America. I'm going to say that again. Africa has to understand that Africa is going to become the new America. America is becoming communized and socialized, but there's a lot of people investing in Africa. They're building small Silicon Valleys in Africa. Akon's part of it. The Chinese are part of it. Europeans, Germans, French, Italians are all part of this colonization of Africa today. And they're going to be the ones investing in the infrastructure. You see the Chinese will build roads, right? And the roads will come in exchange for, if you find water underneath the ground, we own that.
Yeah.
Don't allow these people to build infrastructure. Do not allow any non-African to build infrastructure unless you negotiate that the ownership is for Africans. We're not giving up our natural resources for roads.
That's happening.
Water is more. What's that?
That's happening as we speak, even in Mozambique. Yeah.
Yes, we are exchanging temporary goods for resources such as water, gold, minerals, you name it. When these things have way more power, way more value than some road that's going to break down in a few years anyway. It might break down in a year. They don't even build the roads properly, right?
Yeah.
They're going to build hospitals.
We have an interesting question here. So Bruna was asking about the African American term, that word we often hear about. Do Americans do black people in America actually see themselves as half black and half American, and they like the Afro-American, or black is more used among black people? In your case,
Black
how do you
black
your
black is black is more used than anything else.
mm,
Um, Now, subconsciously, we know we're African. Some of us, again, being Europeanized, don't want
mm,
nothing to do with Africa, right? But you got to understand that that's not all of us. That's just some of us. Now, African American, the term African American doesn't mean half and half. African American means we are Africans with American citizenship.
mm,
You see, it's different to know what your blood is as opposed to what your legal status is based upon these European designations, right? I can't say I'm African when I go to the consulate, right? I'm a citizen of the United States of America. It's a corporation. You got to understand that the United States of America is not a country. It is
mm,
not a country. It is a corporation. Go look this up. I think
mm,
statute 5A-1.
mm,
It's a corporation. So when we say American, we're talking about our corporate designation, what it says on our passport. So when we go to the embassy or the consulate, we know this person's coming from the corporation of America. The African part is talking about our lineage, our bloodline. So to
mm,
designate and say, look, we are not legally African, but our lineage is African, which is why we have to append African American so people understand the difference between us and a native African.
mhm.
If you go look at a brother by the name of Marshawn Lynch, he's a NFL football player. You familiar with that name?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Marshawn Lynch, in an interview one day, a black man asked him a question. He said, "What's good, my African?" He doesn't refer to us as blacks or African
Mm,
Americans. He refers to all of us as Africans.
mm,
If you look at Marshawn Lynch, the media used to vilify him. They
mm,
used to, uh, when you look at the Super Bowl, Marshawn Lynch, I don't know what you guys know about American football, but they were at the goal line, means they have to go 1 yard, which is approximately, I think, 3 meters,
mhm.
uh, to get to the end zone to score the winning touchdown to win the game. This is Marshawn Lynch's specialty. Short yardage plays. You know what they did?
Yeah.
They gave the ball to the mulatto kid.
Mm,
The mulatto kid threw an interception and they lost the game. And everybody in the world was asking themselves, why didn't you give the ball to Marshawn Lynch when he specializes in short yardage downs? Because they didn't want an African and an outspoken African to
mm,
win the game because that would give us too much power. Now, what you'll see in America is they'll push certain black faces up, and those black faces have been mentally integrated. They don't think they're Africans. They think they are Americans, so to
mhm.
speak, right? They want to be Americans. They love America. But anybody who has an African consciousness, whether they are on the left or the right, you will not see them in the media. They hide people like us. They don't want
Yeah,
you to know.
dangerous.
What's that?
Dangerous people, right?
We're a danger. We'll actually wake people up and tell and show them who we are.
Mhm.
And that's what they don't want. They don't want people understanding who we are and understand the dynamics of history and the people that we are.
So yeah, it's very powerful, man. And what I want from this conversation is actually for us here in Mozambique to understand better ourselves as Africans, and to people in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Ghana, Botswana, all over Africa, to really think about our history, our background, our legacy, and our richness, and to be proud of who we are and who we were, and to own it, and to be a part and to live up to that standard.
Can I ask you a question? Are you familiar with the Zulu? Are you familiar with the Zulu?
Yeah, yes, I am.
How many different Zulu groups are there?
Man, a lot. So uh, Africa is artificially divided, as you know, in countries.
Yeah. There are
So
13. Last time I checked, there are 13 Zulu tribes,
yeah,
and they argue with each other, right?
yeah, they do.
They war with each other, right?
Yeah,
Now, wasn't it the Zulu tribe that was kicking the white man's ass?
it was indeed.
Okay, so this is the same thing they do in America. In America, we have this thing called Bloods and Crips. Now,
Yeah,
blood stands for
mhm.
brotherly love overrides oppression and destruction. Does that sound like a destructive gang to you, or does it sound like a loving gang?
A loving game, man.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
loving name.
right. So what these alphabet organizations in America do, right? These ABC organizations, what they'll do is they'll get a black man to pose as a blood, go into Crip territory and kill him, then have somebody pose as a Crip and kill a blood, and you start this war. The
Mm,
Zulu tribe is no different. You can't defeat, they couldn't defeat the Zulu tribe, so they had to figure out how do we divide the Zulu tribe up. And 13 is a number that these elites like to work under. 13 is the number of Da'ath under Kabbalah, and these people are operating under the power of Kabbalah.
mm,
So they divided the Zulus up into 13 tribes. They took Africa and they carved it up like a Thanksgiving turkey. In Africa, we speak thousands of languages, right? And one group of people looks at the next group of people like they're better than them, right?
yeah.
If you, in Nigeria, you got the Zosa, you got the help me out.
I can talk to you about Mozambique. So we have more than 20 languages just in Mozambique.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so these groups are always arguing, your jollof rice is better than mine. I mean, my jollof rice is better than yours. My rice is better than yours. So we arguing over the most stupid things ever. We got to understand is the European put that there. The European divided us up because the European is a minority on this planet. And what do they call black people in America? Minorities. But when we look at the population across the earth, there are more Chinese people than white people. There are more black people than white people. There are more Africans than white people. White people are a minority on this planet. And the only way a minority can defeat another army is to get the army to defeat itself. Mm-hmm. And that's what Africans are doing today. We are defeating ourselves. We have to drop. I'm not saying drop your languages, enjoy your languages. I think it's an advantage to have these languages. But understand that you are all one people. And until you unite as one people and say, hey, look, my rice tastes different from yours, it's not about whose is better. It's just different. So let's come together and let's blend these cultures and share these cultures. And you enjoy my rice and I'll enjoy your rice. But it's not who's better and my dance is better than yours and your dance is better, and you act like this and you act like that. No, everybody's different. As individuals, there are no two individuals on earth that are alike. So it is not to say that you have to be alike, but you have to understand Igbo. Thank you. Yoruba, Hausa. Yes, thank you. Igbo was the one I was trying to think of. I got an Igbo kid on my soccer team here. I coach soccer. But we have to understand that it's fine to be different, but that difference is what created the wars. It created the tribal warfare that we see happening in many places in Africa that is perpetuated by the Arab and it's perpetuated by the European. In fact, the goddamn Arabs are actually Europeans, but that's another story for another day. You see how fair-skinned they are, many of them. But the moral of the story is, even here in America, what we're trying to do is unite black people, right? We're trying to unite the African American. We're trying to, there's many African Americans who know they love Africans. And there's some Africans that love African Americans. Some of y'all love our culture. Some of y'all love our music. We have to understand that that is your culture. It's not our culture. That's your culture. And your culture is our culture. Without the drum being invented in Africa, there is no rap music. And rap music's all about that drum, right? We have to understand that rap music was created by a Jamaican. It wasn't created by an African American. It was created by a Jamaican in America, in New York. I think his name was Kool Herc, if I'm not mistaken. Started from the DJ. But that comes from reggae music. and reggae music is another form of African music. We're
Yeah.
all the same people with slight differences. I need my Africans to look at each other and say, I'm your brother and I'm your sister. And what you'll see is, especially on social media, you'll see some blacks making fun of Africans, and you see some Africans making fun of some African Americans. And again, that's that mentality that's put in them by the European.
Mm.
But that's not, when I went to Africa, I was in Tanzania, I was in a meeting, and the African said to me, he said, welcome home. And I smiled and I said, thank you. I appreciate that. So he saw me as an African. He didn't see me as separate. And this was an educated man. You have to be educated to say something like that. And when he said it, I think he was expecting me not to understand him, but I smiled and I said, thank you. And he was shocked. He gave me this look like, wow, you understand you are an African. Yes, I understand I am an African. And there are many black people in America who understand they are Africans, but you won't see us on TV. They will not allow us on TV, which is why you don't see it. And they'll always push some bootlicking Negro who says we're not African. And then the Africans in Africa think we don't want to be African and we don't like Africans because it's the only thing they show on TV. But there are millions of us who know we are African.
And when I see you on TV, is to talk about the Starbucks prank or things like that, like soft information, soft things, right?
Yeah, you saw me. What I had to do get on TV, right? In
Yeah.
order for me to get on TV, I had to pull a prank. They don't want it, as educated as I am. They don't want my educated. They want to just laugh and joke, right?
Yeah.
But when you go look, what was I wearing when I went on Fox News?
Yeah, all African wear.
I have a friend.
Yellow and black. Yeah.
Yeah, it was gold and black. I have a friend in Ghana who sent me that from Ghana. I didn't go on there with the European necktie and suit like the rest of these fools, right? I wore African garb. They don't like that. That's why I ain't been back since.
Cool, man. Look, I want to get you in Mozambique to talk about this in person. Maybe we can do a live event, a workshop, and bring history, and you can learn more also about African history and Mozambique in particular. So once the COVID situation is over, an invitation is already made, man. I want you here to have a face-to-face conversation and bring some youth, some students, and let's talk about it.
I'll come. I'm there. A lot of people are scared though.
We are.
The last thing I'll say is this. When I made the plans to come to Africa, it was for a German company. And I said, we need to go to Africa. We need to do some filming because you have the farms there and I want to see them. Great point, Michael. Great point. So I was nervous, right? I was nervous. I'm like, am I going to get kidnapped? Is some tribe going to kill me? Like all these things. And I had to slap myself and say, stop that. That's that European mindset trying to stop you from going. But it was funny because my aunt called me up. She said, be careful. It's Africa. It's dangerous, da, da, da. And then somebody else says, Africa is dangerous, da, da, da. And I'm like, wow, they really instilled a fear in us to not go back to the continent because it's power. It's power to go back to the continent. But I have some brothers here. I'll talk to Wordsmith and we'll bring some kids down and we'll definitely do it.
And we're gonna try to spread this video through countries in Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, even in Mozambique. And let's talk about things and let's think and let's learn about our history and ourselves.
Yeah, anytime you want me back, my African brother, I'm there. Anytime you want me on your YouTube or whatever, and you need to talk to me, find out what's going on in America or vice versa, call me. I'm here. Let's do it.
I will. Hotep. Thank you very much, my friend. And we keep in touch.
Yep. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Peace.
Peace. Bye-bye. So thank you, everybody. That was it for today with our guest, Hotep Jesus. So stay tuned and share this video with your friends, family, because I think it was a powerful message and everybody needs to hear about this and learn about this. And we keep in touch. We'll be back next week with another guest. We'll be sharing the details soon. It's going to be in Portuguese, but we will be mixing between Portuguese speaking guests and English and even Spanish sometimes. So thank you very much. We keep in touch and have a great weekend. Bye.